Daniel Brooks was no stranger to long nights. As a single father, overtime shifts had become part of his survival routine. The quiet hum of his aging car accompanied him as he drove through the nearly empty streets of the city, his thoughts drifting to his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, who would be fast asleep by now with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. He often told himself these extra hours were for her, for new shoes, for school trips, for the small things he didn't want her to miss out on just because life had been unfair when her mother walked out years ago. That night, however, as he turned down a dimly lit street, something unusual caught his eye. A sleek black luxury sedan pulled unevenly against the curb, its headlights still on, and the driver's side door hanging slightly open. At first, Daniel's instincts told him to mind his own business. Nothing good ever came from meddling with strangers at midnight, but then he noticed a figure slumped over the wheel. His heart skipped. Someone needed help. He parked and cautiously approached, ready to call for assistance, but the sight that met him stopped him cold. It wasn't just anyone in that car, it was Evelyn Harrington, the iron-willed CEO of Harrington Enterprises, the woman whose reputation for cold precision and ruthless decisions had made her both feared and admired across the company. Daniel had only ever seen her from afar, gliding through the lobby in tailored suits, untouchable and commanding, like she belonged to another world entirely. Yet here she was, disheveled, her usually impeccable hair loose and messy, mascara streaked faintly beneath her tired eyes, the faint smell of alcohol clinging to the air. When he tapped gently on the window, her head turned sluggishly, her eyes glassy and unfocused. "I'm fine," she muttered hoarsely, though her trembling hands fumbled helplessly with the keys in the ignition. Daniel's first instinct was fear, not of her state, but of what this meant. If anyone saw him here with her, it could be misunderstood. He was an ordinary employee in accounts, replaceable at the snap of her fingers, and she was his powerful boss. But then, just as quickly, another thought took over: Lily. He wanted to be the kind of man his daughter could look up to, the kind of man who didn't turn away from someone in need. So, swallowing his nerves, he leaned in closer. "Ms. Harrington, it's Daniel Brooks, from accounts," he said softly, hoping the familiarity might ground her. She squinted, recognition flickering dimly in her hazy gaze, but made no move to protest when he gently guided her out of the car. She swayed, nearly collapsing, and instinctively he wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her against him. The woman who commanded boardrooms and stockholders now leaned on a single dad's shoulder like a fragile child. He couldn't in good conscience leave her in her car, nor did he trust himself to take her anywhere public where gossip would spread like wildfire. After a moment of hesitation, he made a decision that felt both dangerous and right: he would bring her home. Back at his modest apartment, he eased her onto the couch, draped a blanket over her, and set a glass of water within reach. For a brief second, her lips parted, and she whispered something about being tired of everything before drifting into heavy sleep. Daniel sat quietly in the dim light, glancing from her fragile form to the closed door of Lily's room, his heart heavy with uncertainty. He knew the morning would bring questions, perhaps even consequences, but for now, he had done what he hoped Lily would one day understand: when someone needed help, you gave it, no matter who they were. The first rays of sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds of Daniel's small apartment, illuminating the modest kitchen where the aroma of pancakes filled the air, a ritual he kept every weekend to make mornings special for Lily. He hoped the scent of something normal would steady his nerves, because in the living room lay the last person he ever imagined hosting under his roof, Evelyn Harrington, the woman who could make seasoned executives tremble with a single glance. He half expected her to vanish silently before morning, leaving nothing behind but the faint trace of expensive perfume on the couch. But when he stepped into the living room, she was still there, stirring slightly, her brow furrowing as if even her dreams were weighted with burdens. She woke with a sharp inhale, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling, then bolted upright, confusion etched across her face until her gaze fell on Daniel standing nearby. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice raspy but edged with the authority that seemed woven into her very being. Daniel offered her the glass of water he had left on the table, keeping his tone calm and respectful. "You're safe, Ms. Harrington. I found you in your car last night. You weren't in a state to drive, so I brought you here." Her eyes widened, the reality sinking in, and for a split second the icy composure cracked, replaced by something startlingly close to fear. "You brought me here. To your home?" she said, glancing around at the humble surroundings, a stark contrast to the luxury she was accustomed to. Daniel opened his mouth to explain further, but before he could, a small voice broke through the tension. "Daddy, who's that?" Lily stood in the doorway to her bedroom, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her rabbit dangling from her hand. Evelyn froze as though caught off guard by the mere existence of a child in this scenario. Daniel crouched to Lily's level and smiled reassuringly. "This is Ms. Harrington, Daddy's boss. She's our guest this morning." Lily tilted her head curiously, then offered a shy smile that carried the kind of warmth no amount of wealth could buy. "Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes the best ones." Evelyn blinked, visibly taken aback, clearly unused to such simple kindness, especially from a child. She started to shake her head, muttering that she wasn't hungry, but as the scent of fresh pancakes drifted closer, her stomach betrayed her with a faint growl. Daniel pretended not to notice, simply setting another plate at the small kitchen table. Much to her own surprise, Evelyn accepted and ate slowly, her elegant posture out of place in the cramped kitchen, yet she seemed almost at ease. She listened in silence as Lily chattered about school, her stuffed rabbit, and how her daddy always made heart-shaped pancakes on Sundays. For Evelyn, who lived in a world of boardrooms and sterile luxury, the warmth of this tiny apartment and the sight of a father and daughter's easy bond stirred something she hadn't felt in years. When breakfast was over, she rose abruptly, smoothing her blouse as though piecing her armor back together. At the door, she paused, her gaze flicking briefly to Lily before settling on Daniel. "What you did last night, thank you," she said in a low voice, then added firmly, "but this stays between us." Without another word, she left, leaving Daniel staring after her, his chest heavy with unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected collision of their worlds had set something in motion neither of them could stop. The following Monday, Daniel walked into Harrington Enterprises with his stomach in knots, every step toward his desk heavier than the last, haunted by the memory of Evelyn Harrington in his living room and her final warning that what had happened must remain a secret. He half expected a summons to her office, perhaps a terse dismissal, because powerful people like her didn't allow cracks in their armor to be seen, and certainly not by employees so far down the corporate ladder. But instead of reprimand or cold indifference, something strange happened. During the weekly staff meeting, Evelyn swept into the room as she always did, immaculate in a tailored suit, her presence sharp and commanding, but when her gaze brushed over him, Daniel felt a flicker of something different, something softer, before she continued with the agenda. Halfway through, she did the unthinkable, she singled him out in front of the entire staff. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice steady, "your recent dedication and the additional hours you've taken on have not gone unnoticed. Your reliability is an asset to this company." The room went silent for a beat, stunned. Evelyn Harrington had never been known to acknowledge someone of his position, and Daniel felt his face flush hot as every head turned in his direction. He nodded awkwardly, murmuring a thank you, but inside, his heart raced with confusion. Why had she done that? What game was she playing? Afterward, whispers spread quickly through the office corridors. Some speculated he must have done something extraordinary to earn her praise, others assumed he had some kind of leverage on her, though none dared say it outright. Daniel ignored the gossip as best he could, focusing on his work, but it became increasingly difficult when Evelyn began appearing at his desk more often, bypassing layers of management to ask him directly for reports or updates. At first, he thought it was coincidence, but then he noticed the way her eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary, or how she glanced at the doodle Lily had drawn, pinned proudly on his corkboard, and allowed the faintest smile to tug at her lips. It was so subtle that anyone else would have missed it, but to Daniel it was startling, a glimpse of humanity in the woman everyone considered carved from ice. Still, her behavior left him unsettled. This was his boss, a woman whose decisions dictated the livelihoods of hundreds, and yet she seemed to be weaving threads of connection that shouldn't exist between them. He found himself wrestling with unease and curiosity in equal measure, wondering if she was merely keeping an eye on him to ensure his silence, or if something deeper was shifting inside her. As days passed, the whispers in the office grew louder, but Daniel kept his head down, determined not to give anyone reason to suspect the truth. Yet in quiet moments, when he caught Evelyn watching him with that same searching look, he couldn't shake the feeling that what had started as a single midnight act of kindness was unraveling the tightly bound fabric of her carefully constructed world, and drawing him, against all reason, into the center of it. The collision of their two worlds came sooner than Daniel had expected. On a gray and rainy evening when the phone rang with news that sent his heart racing, Lily had taken a fall at school during rehearsal and needed to be picked up. He rushed out of the office, ignoring the curious stares of co-workers, and drove straight to the school, his hands tight on the steering wheel, worry gnawing at him. But when he arrived at the nurse's office, soaked from the storm outside, he froze at the sight before him, Evelyn Harrington, still in her tailored suit, already sitting beside Lily's bed, speaking to the nurse with uncharacteristic gentleness. She had been at the school for a board meeting as part of her company's sponsorship program and had recognized Lily immediately when she was brought in. For a moment, Daniel stood speechless, caught between relief for his daughter and shock that his iron-willed CEO was here, her presence no longer that of a distant figure but someone unexpectedly close, someone who seemed genuinely concerned. When Lily's eyes lit up at the sight of her father, Evelyn stepped back, allowing him to kneel by the bed, but not before murmuring softly, "She's brave. She'll be fine." The sincerity in her tone struck him deeply. Later, when the nurse cleared Lily to go home, Evelyn offered them a ride, and though Daniel hesitated, wary of blurring lines further, he couldn't refuse with Lily's small hand clutching his and Evelyn's expectant gaze waiting. The car ride was quiet at first, filled only with the patter of rain on the windows, but Lily soon broke the silence, chattering about her fall, her friends, and even offering Evelyn half of a candy bar she had tucked in her pocket. To Daniel's surprise, Evelyn accepted with a faint laugh, the sound soft and almost foreign coming from her. That night became the first of many small steps that brought her into their lives in ways neither had foreseen. She visited their apartment more than once, sometimes under the pretense of discussing work, other times with no excuse at all, and each time the edges of her icy exterior seemed to melt just a little more. She sat with Lily during homework, listened to her stories, even praised Daniel's simple cooking with an honesty that felt worlds apart from her polished boardroom persona. Yet the true shock came weeks later during a company-wide meeting, when Evelyn stood before her employees, poised and commanding as always, but instead of delivering the usual speech about profits and goals, she spoke about loyalty, integrity, and the importance of recognizing humanity beyond titles and positions. And then, to the audible gasp of the room, she acknowledged Daniel by name, crediting him with reminding her of those values. Daniel felt every eye in the room turn toward him, his chest tight with disbelief, but when his gaze met Evelyn's, he found not the icy mask of his CEO but the steady, unapologetic warmth of a woman who had allowed herself to be changed. In that moment, the line between their worlds didn't just blur, it disappeared, leaving behind the possibility of something greater, trust, family, and perhaps even love, born from a midnight act of kindness that had rewritten both their lives.